I'm Major General Ulysses S. Grant, and I am here on the bank of what was the Tennessee River at the site of Johnsonville Depot. This depot was built in the fall of 1863 to supply General Sherman in his attempt to take Atlanta, Georgia. The Federal forces came here because behind me is, or was at that time, the Tennessee River. It's now Kentucky Lake. After the war, the river was dammed and created a lake. And the Johnsonville Depot at the town of Johnsonville, Tennessee, was located here where I'm standing. It was built to supply General Sherman. 100,000 men and more than 35,000 mules and horses. Sherman didn't want a long supply line that had to be guarded and garrisoned, so we built this depot here. Shipping could come down from the Midwest, down the Ohio, the Mississippi River, and the Tennessee River, and be unloaded here onto a railroad that went into Nashville. We had a 78-mile United States military railroad built to run from this river to Nashville, Tennessee. There was so much shipping going on here, so many thousands of tons of supplies and ammunition, that a railroad train was leaving Nashville, Tennessee every hour around the clock to supply Sherman and other forces south of Nashville, Tennessee. When we decided to build this depot here in 1863, we built the railroad, and it quickly became a major shipping point. It sounds like the Confederates may be moving in on us now. That's coming from Nathan Bedford Forrest State Park just across the lake. That's where General Forrest had Morton's battery firing on this location. You are indeed fortunate to hear the artillery from where it was at that time. But in November of '64, General Forrest was tasked and charged with coming here and destroying this base. And he did so. As you just heard the artillery, he had John Morton, set up his battery on that side of the river, firing over here. They destroyed several steamboats of supplies, several Federal gunboats, and those that weren't destroyed by Forrest artillery were set fire by the Federals, and all of their shipping was burned to the water line. When they set fire to their boats, that in turn set fire to all of the warehouses. Forrest's artillery did not burn the warehouses. The Federals' own actions burned their warehouses. It was burned to the ground and completely destroyed. It was a major victory for General Forrest, and there are some uniquities about this place, Johnsonville State Historic Park in Tennessee and Nathan Bedford Forrest State Park in Tennessee, that you should know. First, this is the only time in the American Civil War that a land-based cavalry unit, General Forrest with his cavalry and artillery on that side of the river, firing over here, defeated the Navy in a battle. The only time in the war a cavalry unit defeated a naval unit in combat. It is also the only place in the country where there are two state parks, Johnsonville State Historic Park, Nathan Bedford Forrest State Historic Park, two state parks that are opposite each other, both dedicated to the same event, the Battle of Johnsonville, Tennessee in November of 1864. No other state has anything like that. So the outcome of the raid, as successful as it was on General Forrest's part, completely destroying the Johnsonville warehouse, completely destroying the facilities, briefly did very little to affect the war. By November of 1864, the loss of this warehouse was just a scratch on the Federal machines. Within weeks, it was built back and back in operation. General Sherman was getting supplies from other sources, so it did nothing to affect the outcome of the war. Brilliant victory though it may have been, unique victory though it may have been. And once again we hear Confederate artillery shelling us. What a treat for you to be able to hear. So I urge you, if you have the opportunity, come to Johnsonville State Historic Park in the state of Tennessee. It's just off Interstate 40 at exit 143. And while you are here, go across the river and visit Nathan Bedford Forrest State Park. Again, the only two state parks in America that are opposite each other, both dedicated to the same event, the Battle of Johnsonville, Tennessee, in November of 1864. You have your orders.
Second intervals. Fire.
Until 1864, this was known as Lucas Landing. This was a steamboat landing on the Tennessee River. But when the Civil War comes, when the Union Army captured Nashville, they commandeered the railroad that was being built out this way toward the Tennessee River. It stopped at that time at Kingston Springs, and the Union Army finished the railroad into what became known as Johnsonville. They built a big warehouse complex here for moving cargo from the river to the rails, and then from there on up to Nashville. So they were moving boatloads, literally boatloads of cargo through here every day. Everything you can think of that the Union Army was using to keep their men in the field. All their boots, their shirts, pants, overcoats, coats, hats, tin cups, blankets, picks and shovels, axes and saws, bowls, nails, candles, soap, all their food was all coming through here. All of what General Sherman's army was using over in the Atlanta campaign was coming through here. So they weren't selling stuff to individual people. They weren't issuing stuff to individual people here. They were just getting it off the steamboats, running it through their warehouses, inspecting the cargo, and then loading trainloads of it to send to Nashville, and then it was distributed from there further down towards Chattanooga and eventually, eventually into Georgia to General Sherman's army. But you don't really think about all the stuff it takes to keep 70,000 men fed and clothed and sheltered in the field for months at a time. But it literally took thousands of pounds of things. Johnsonville was able to move 1,000 tons of cargo every day in the middle of 1864. So that's a pretty good accomplishment when you stop and think about it. And I've got a bit of a display of everything that's here, the things that we know of that came.
The laundress was a paid position for the Army. She would be the wife or maybe the mother of an enlisted soldier, probably not an officer. And she would work for probably 20 to 25 soldiers. She would be back in the encampments that would be next to a source of water, be it a creek or a river. So there would be lots of ladies doing this, and there would be rows and rows of tents doing this, and they would actually call it Sud's Row, as we would all be doing laundry. Here in Johnsonville, we probably would be down closer to the river. The soldier would bring his clothes, ever how many articles he would have, and I would write down in my black book, right here, the number of articles he had brought me, and I would unit price it, a nickel for a shirt or whatever, and then it would go to the sorting pile, and my partner, Miss Andrea, is sorting all the clothes. Once the clothes have been sorted, then we need to send them in for a good long soak. If the clothes were so dirty, remember these clothes had been worn for weeks and weeks of time. They would be so dirty a lot of times we would have to let the dirt dry and bat it out with a little wooden bat that I would have. But we've got these in soak. Now once we finish the soaking, we're going to take them to the washing machine. This is actually the washing machine. Most all these would be wooden buckets. I would shave off the soap down in the bucket, and this is called a pauser. And these are actually available today. And it actually, as this washing machine, as she beats it around and around and around. And once that is done and removes the dirt, she would inspect the clothes for stains. If she saw that there were stains that still needed to be removed, she would bring it over here to the scrub board. She would spot the stains on the scrub board, add more soap to the article, and then she would continue to rub it out on the scrub board. These are modern day scrub boards, as the ones that were used in 1864, they were all wooden, and a lot of those did not survive because of the water, and they were probably thrown away at some point. So if you see a wooden scrub board, you probably got you a deal. So once the clothes were scrubbed, we still haven't dealt with the infestation of lice. The clothes are still full of lice, as this did not remove the lice infestation. So then's when the clothes had to be taken to the boiling pot. A good 2-hour rolling boil would remove the lice and the nits that were in the weaves of the fibers. So Miss Andrea's got a washing fork, and she's going to pick up the clothes in the washing fork. And then she's going to take them over here to the final rinse. Now, if we were doing officer shirts, they wanted their shirts really white. But we don't have access to bleaches, this type thing, so we would add bluing. You can actually buy commercial bluing today. It would come in a pill form or a powder. You would dilute it in some of the water, add it to your final rinse, and it would make the appearance of white, as opposed to the yellow cast that was left on the shirt through the wash and the wear part. She would take the clothes out of the final rinse. And today we have a wringer. This is something special because a lot of people didn't have access to a wringer. They had to actually hand wring the clothes out. But because we're in a town setting down here in Johnsonville, we have us a wringer today. And the clothes would be wrung out. And if the weather were a little bit wetter, clothes would have to go through the wringer many times in order to get as dry as you could, in order to get them to the ironing board as soon as possible. Because this was an ever-ending process from morning till night. We're constantly going to the river, we're constantly chopping your wood, making sure that you had all the supplies available to do your job and get these clothes done for the soldier. Probably somewhere near our laundry tent would be a place for us to take a bath. So while he was delicing himself, we were getting his clothes ready. So now we're ready for the ironing board. Sandra's going to go over here to the ironing board. And if we were doing a soldier, an officer shirt, and he wanted his collar stiff, we would add beeswax. Beeswax candles were readily available. We would heat the collar of the shirt up, rub the beeswax over to continue that process till we got the thickness, the stiffness that we wanted. We would keep our iron hot from the fire to the ironing board because we probably have 2 or 3 irons that we would change out during that process. And then at the end of the month, we would take our little black book down to the quartermaster, and he would pay us. We got paid before the soldier. The soldier had, you might call, the first payroll deduction, because they would deduct from the little black book that the laundress had washed for him. She also did most of the mending. A soldier did have a little mending kit, which is called a housewife. He would have this possibly tucked in his haversack. And then he would have this in case he needed to mend his own. If he did not have access to the laundress, or possibly couldn't afford one, normally they wore their clothes so they were about worn out, and he would just have to send home for more. The laundress would go to the river. She would put her yoke on the back of her neck. Took 5 trips to the river just to get enough water to do 1 load of laundry. So this was probably something that maybe one of the boys of the camp, some of the older kids that could take it, this weighed about 40 pounds, so they could go back and forth to the river to keep the water going. This usually took about 3 days to do laundry. Very labor intensive and very time intensive. Remember, these people in the 1860s were much smaller than we are today. The normal sized woman was probably around a size 2. So she was very strong and, in my opinion, probably a very, very smart lady.
What I'm making today is apple butter, and I'm making it the traditional way in a copper pot. So what I got here is 9 pounds of apples. It's a mixture of Gala apples and Golden Delicious. And I put them in the pot with some apple juice to cook in. They've been cooking since about 9 o'clock this morning. It's almost 2 o'clock right now. And they're not quite cooked down yet, so it's a very long process. And you have to continuously stir the apples. If you stop stirring for more than a few minutes, then they stick to the pot and they burn. But to make apple butter, what you want to do is you want to cook your apples down until they get really soft and smooth like applesauce. And then you get to add in all of your sugar and spices. So all of my spices and sugar are on the table here. So what I have is white sugar, brown sugar, and some molasses. And then in my bowl I have cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, and allspice. And I don't go by any particular recipe. I just like to add in a little bit here and a little bit there, and I taste as I go, and whenever it tastes good to me, then I'm done. Then it's apple butter. But during the Civil War, this would have been a way for people to preserve their apples. So by making apple butter, or preserves, or jam, or jelly, or even with their vegetables, pickling their vegetables, it was a way for them to preserve their food so they could have fruit and vegetable throughout the winter. And during the Civil War, I would have been considered a camp follower, and so that I would have done exactly like it sounds. I would have followed the regiment of soldiers around wherever they went. I could have done this for a few reasons. Perhaps I was a young woman who needed to make a living. I could have gone to the head of the camp and said, if you pay me a wage, I'll cook your meals for you, I'll do your laundry, I'll do chores around camp. Or one of the more common reasons for being a camp follower was to stay near a loved one. So if I had a husband who was one of the soldiers, or if I had a father, brother, son, you know, anybody I was close to, I would have followed the camp so I could be close to them and take care of them as much as I could.
But if you miss it, and I hit those 3 sticks, you are out. Like a strike. That's what I'm aiming at.
All right, now come on.
I got 4 balls. Stand there, swing away. They're coming on the bounce now. Figured I can throw it on the bounce here. Okay, here. Yeah, way to dig it out. Good shot.
I'll take it!
Okay, yeah. Take it there. Take it there. Good one, sir. Good job. Okay. Stay there, sir. 4 more coming. 4 more coming. Now, you want the fast stuff? You want the heat? Okay, yeah. Okay. Good shot. That's fair ball in cricket. That is true. Everything you hit's fair. Okay. Hey, honey, give me that shot. Come up a little bit. Come up a bit. Yeah, right there. That's it. Okay, okay. Dig it in here, Claire. Pretty good, pretty good.
Hold on.
Okay, your ball, you go get it. Okay, you go get it. Okay, who's next? Nice. All right, give me that shot. All right, not bad, not bad, not bad. Okay, who's next?
Okay, look. They're playing ball. I got stuck.
All right, too wide though. You're stinking baseball. You're throwing a strike. You should be coming in right in here. Coming tight inside, right there. All right, good one, Curt. Good. No panic. You can hit the batter. Watch where you hit the ball. You got to hit the ball before it hits you. All right, who's next? Go ahead and have a turn. Okay, sir, take your turn. Come up a little bit, honey. Scoot up a little bit. There you go. Okay, bring it in here. No. Kind of bring the technique. Oh, not bad, not bad. Okay, there you go.
Kingsley, I am doing an Old Aid program for y'all today. So Old Aid was a live bald eagle that was carried around by the 8th Wisconsin Volunteer Infantry Regiment. It's a pretty interesting story. So this bird was picked up out of the wild as an eaglet in 1861 and and eventually sold to a unit that joined up with the 8th Wisconsin Volunteer Infantry Regiment. They actually carried this eagle with them to the battlefield. So what they did was they made a special perch with a stylized shield on the front, and they had them behind the lines on the battlefield. And they actually took Old Abe between 1861 and 1863 to around 37 battlefiels. The closest one to Tennessee being the Battle of Island Pen up in northwest Tennessee on the Mississippi River. Some notable ones were at Corinth and Vicksburg. Basically, they took this eagle with them, and it became pretty much a celebrity. You could argue that this is one of the most popular and famous bald eagles in history. So after 1863, he was taken off of the battlefield. He no longer followed the 8th. He was sent back to Wisconsin, and he was declared a war relic. Basically, they created a Eagle department at the Wisconsin Capitol building, and then they housed Old Abe until his passing in 1881. Now, even after 1881, they put his preserved mounted remains in the Capitol building, and even today, you can go to Madison to the Wisconsin Capitol building and see a replica of Old Abe. Old Abe was very inspirational to the troops, and even today you can see his likeness. If anyone's familiar with the 101st Airborne, that inspiration for that symbol was Old Abe. Now this bird here is missing the white head and tail. Now that means this is a juvenile bald eagle. They don't get the white head and tail until about 5 years of age, which is very fortunate for us because Old Abe was actually a juvenile bald eagle during the war. So while he was following around the 8th Infantry, they actually had a juvenile brown-headed, brown-tailed bald eagle. He didn't actually get the white head and tail until he was already a war relic in Wisconsin. Now, this particular bird is, we had it on loan from Reelfoot Lake State Park for this program. So this is where its permanent home is. Reelfoot has a very large aviary, so if y'all ever want to see this bird again, just go up to Reelfoot Lake State Park. All of the birds that we program with Tennessee State Parks are going to be educational birds, so they're non-releasable in some way. So we're not taking healthy bald eagles and put them in cages and programming with them. This bird has a wing injury and will be in captivity for its entire life, but that is a good thing. These birds can live up to twice as long in captivity, get good, healthy food, parasite-free. This bird here will get a big fresh carp every day or a duck, and will live a pretty good life and come out and program with y'all in a lot of different state parks. Again, I'm Park Ranger Michael Beasley. If y'all have eagle questions, I wouldn't say I'm an expert, but I know all the basics. Feel free to ask. If you have any Old Abe questions, feel free to ask. And otherwise, thank y'all for joining me for my Old Abe program. Very, very cool bird. This is a large female.
All right.
Like that around so much that they can't even buy a house on the island that they live on. You know.
Even though you're not